Hey, friends, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm very excited about what we're going to be discussing today. I'm joined by a very special guest from the Immigrant Defenders Law Center who will be talking about some really important litigation that they've been involved in that is impacting a lot of people. I'd like for you to stick around all the way until the end to know what's going on and what's on the horizon, and certainly how you can get involved and support the mission of great organizations like this one that is out there on the front lines fighting for you. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. I'm LaToya McBean-Pompey, an immigration lawyer in New York, working with clients nationwide at McBean Law. Certainly type in freedom now before you go today. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell before you go. Now let's bring on the Director of Litigation and Advocacy at the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, and it's ImmDef for short.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, LaToya. My name is Alvaro Huerta. I'm Director of Litigation Advocacy at MDEF based out of Los Angeles, California.
All right, excellent. What is it that you do there at ImmDef, Alvaro?
Sure. So IMDEF is the largest deportation defense legal services organization, nonprofit organization in California. And so we primarily represent a huge number of undocumented folks who are in deportation proceedings. That can be children, adults, especially vulnerable populations, not only children, but people with mental health incapacities, deported veterans. Lots of other folks we work on a universal representation model, which means that doesn't matter what we think, the merits of someone's case. We really believe that every immigrant deserves a lawyer in immigration court. And so that's really our mission, to make sure that no immigrant stands alone.
Right, that's a terrific mission. And we certainly believe that at McBean Law as well, that everyone deserves to be represented by an attorney, and certainly through the good work of organizations like yours, standing with the community. You're based in, is it Los Angeles?
Yes, I'm based in Los Angeles, but we actually have offices also in San Diego, Riverside, and Orange County.
Terrific. Now, from my standpoint, one of the biggest issues right now that our country is confronted by, that your organization, ImmDef, is quite involved in, and it has to do with pushing back on the racial profiling that we're seeing across the nation, really more so in places like Los Angeles and Chicago and some other big cities involving Latino population. We know that, and I've been discussing as well, the fact that the Supreme Court in September, they greenlighted racial profiling, right? And from my standpoint, a very, very disappointing decision. But let's take a step back. And if you could just explain for those who are watching and listening today, what happened and how was your organization involved in the fight against racial profiling by ICE, who, for the most part, it seems like they just want to make these arrests without reasonable suspicion. They want to stop, so to speak, stop and make these stops based on race, right? Without that reasonable suspicion to stop. And certainly, I don't know about the probable cause to arrest, but explain to us what's going on here.
Yeah, so back in June of this year, this administration decided that it wanted to put a target on Los Angeles, make an example of this city, right? To really start its immigration crackdown in full force here against the residents. And what we were seeing were roving patrols of masked agents who didn't identify themselves. It's even hard to tell whether they were agents or not, right? They weren't identifying themselves. They were masked, and they were basically roaming the streets of Los Angeles and picking people up. If you looked brown, if you didn't speak English, if you happen to be found near a Home Depot, for example, or a car wash, that's who they were going for. I mean, they were looking for people that they assume were undocumented, but they didn't have any reasonable suspicion. There are plenty of people who are in those places who don't speak Spanish, who are brown, who have lawful status in this country. And so we went into court and we argued that they really did not have reasonable suspicion to take all these folks in. And what we saw was real violence against communities. Many people saw the videos and are seeing what's happening in Chicago too right now. But we saw that in Los Angeles, where agents were just ramming cars and picking people off bus stops and then violently taking them in, not giving them a chance in many cases. They were even picking up people with lawful status and citizens who said at the time, I'm a citizen, not giving them any chance to provide identification and just putting them in vans and taking them to detention facilities.
And you know, what you've just described sounds like an asylum case that we would work on, right? For our clients from another country. Those are the facts that we would typically write about. The fact that police or masked men would stop them or come to their home and hold them up in the middle of the night and persecute them. But this is happening right here in America, which is really, really not just scary. To some extent, it's a little discouraging, right? Because for folks who are sitting at home who they might be brown and they're watching what's going on, they're terrified. What would you say to that individual who is watching all of this unplay in front of them and they're terrified?
I think we really have to understand our rights. I think in this country, we have a constitution, and it says that regardless of your status, you have rights. You have certain due process rights, the ability to go to court, to, counter any charges that are brought against you. You have equal protection rights. You shouldn't be discriminated based on the color of your skin or the language that you speak in this country. We do have those rights, and so we really have to stand up for those rights. It is really terrifying. It's true that this is happening in our own country, in our backyard. The federal government is really acting in a lawless fashion, but we have to exercise those rights. And the first step to exercising those rights is really understanding them. Right? Understanding them for ourselves, making sure that our family members and loved ones understand them, and that our neighbors understand them too, and exercising them. What are those rights? And we all have the right to remain silent, not to give any more information that is required to any agent or not who's asking of it. We have the right to ask for a lawyer. If we're being detained, we have that right to talk to a lawyer. We have a right not to sign anything that we don't understand, that's not in the language that we don't understand, before we agree to anything. Unfortunately, we have heard of people not understanding these rights and actually signing voluntary deportation orders before they've had a chance to talk to a lawyer. We have also seen is that in a lot of these detention facilities, this administration has purposefully let conditions deteriorate drastically. Holding people for days and nights in places that don't have beds, that don't have hygiene products. So these become very coercive conditions, we would argue, that are actually meant to, take away people's hope that they'll ever get out, that they'll ever be back with their families. So that is also coercing people to sign away their rights.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because, I think many of my viewers are familiar with Alligator Alcatraz. And also now, actually, in Texas, there's another tent detention center that was resurrected there at Fort Bliss. And so they see those types of makeshift, so to speak, detention centers popping up here and there. They might not understand, though, what's going on at other places, right? Other detention centers that have been there forever. And you're saying that ICE is purposefully making those conditions harder so that people will just basically give up and just sign over their rights and leave the country?
Yeah, I mean, the detention population has increased by about 50%, which is
Wow.
crazy.
Wow. This year alone.
This year alone, before this administration came in, we had space for about 42,000 people in
Right,
immigration
right, right.
detention. We're now over 60,000 people in detention right now at some of these pop-up shelters, but also filling up the rooms in some of these existing facilities. And we've heard stories, for example, of rooms not even getting cleaned, but the detainees have to ask for brooms and to, try to clean themselves because the administration is refusing in some cases to just clean something as basic as that. So it really is becoming, in many ways, punitive because they're not trying to welcome immigrants. They're trying to make it a situation where people will decide to leave, even if they have an avenue for staying, even if they're eligible for certain things, or, they shouldn't be held in detention at all and can fight their case while, out in their communities. They really want to make it so that people despair and give up hope.
Right, yeah, there's this huge push that we saw that started several months ago about leaving America self-deported. And if you leave America, you'll have a way back. But if you are detained and we deport you, you will not have a way back to the United States. As attorneys, we know that is 100% false, but it is getting in the minds of people, though. And I'm seeing a lot more people who are seriously considering leaving the country, especially when they look at videos on TikTok or YouTube, seeing that folks who are trying to do things the right way, who are showing up at at immigration courts around the country. They're trying to fix their status, yet the system seems to be stacked against them. For some of them, they're being arrested in the courthouses, and Manhattan, more so than any other courthouse across the country, has the highest percentage of immigration courthouse arrests than anywhere else. I think it's also happening, though, in the Los Angeles immigration court as well, but not at the rate that it's happening in Manhattan. So, there's a lot of reasons for folks to just want to give up or feel discouraged or think that the system is stacked against them and that there's no way that they could press on. But organizations like ImmDef has a mission, right? A mission to advocate, a mission to fight, a mission to change lives, a mission to reinforce the rule of law and due process. And we're going to circle back a little bit to the Vasquez case because I think our viewers would also like to know, well, what's happening now in light of the Supreme Court's decision, what's next, and we're going to go back to that. I'd like to shift briefly and talk about children, right? Because we saw earlier this year that the administration cut off federal funding to nonprofit organizations across the country that provided access to counsel for unaccompanied minors who are children who came to the United States without their parents, to put it simply, right? Resources were available to help these children navigate the immigration removal process. And the new administration came in and they cut off those resources and access to counsel. Talk a little bit about what your organization did along those lines to provide fair and equal access to counsel for these children.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because it really does show the cruelty of this administration to go after children and the people who are there to protecting their interests, their lawyers. So ImmDef represents thousands of unaccompanied minors every year, which means that we are with them in court. A child can't represent themselves in court. It's kind of ludicrous to believe that a 4-year-old is going to be able to kind of, make their own case in immigration court. They're still under removal proceedings. So that's why we're there. Beginning of this year, as you mentioned, the administration cut off the funding, basically said, stop the work. We're not funding this anymore. And ImmDef and a number of other organizations went into court to sue the administration to prevent that denial of funding. What we were arguing is basically Congress has said that these children get lawyers in court, and Congress has actually appropriated millions of dollars to ensure that happens. We were very lucky that in court, the judge saw it our way and saw that, yes, there's a congressional obligation. Congress, we as a country have said this is an important thing that we want to put money to, that we think is a protection for the most vulnerable of these kids who don't have a parent or guardian or other representative there in court with them. So we were able to get that funding restarted, and so far it has held. We're still in court fighting that case, but right now we were able to represent those kids in court. And, tragically, there was a time where, for a short while, there wasn't that funding. And we had stories of kids who were deported because they came into the country and they were, immediately deported without being able to analyze their eligibility for some immigration relief in the country.
Right, that's terrific. And then also, just recently, I've reported out to my audience that there was a strange and almost sudden attack again against unaccompanied minors recently, in which ICE made these very strange offers, so to speak, of I think it was $2,500 to leave the United States. And if they do not leave, well, they could be arrested or their parents could be arrested. Then there was this aspect to it, I think. I don't know, I'll let you explain it better than me because I think your organization might have been involved in it, in that fight as well. An aspect to them aging out. If they aged out of the system and they're in detention, I believe they could be deported right away. They would lose certain rights and be deported. Can you shed a little light about that? Because there was a little bit of a good news that came out of that whole Freaky Friday weird incident.
Yeah, so that was just a couple of weeks ago where we had, this news that had come out that the administration was about to really do this with a lot of the kids who are currently in ORR, Office of Refugee Resettlement custody, saying that they were going to make these offers to these kids that if they decided to, again, kind of self-deport or accept repatriation, they would be given $2,500. And in fact, that money would be given to an adult back in their home country. Very unclear how that was going to happen. Sounds a lot, to be honest, to me, like trafficking.
Reverse
Yeah, reverse
trafficking.
trafficking, right? It really
Yeah.
was. It was so odd. But yeah, so they were really kind of creating these conditions where, again, a child, we're talking about 7, 10, 12-year-olds hearing, hey, I can be given $2,500 if I just go home, quote unquote, even if, I don't have anyone to be there with, or the situation is unsafe for me to return to my home. That's tempting for a child who doesn't really understand kind of what's going on. And then what you mentioned, right, with kids who are about to age out, turn 18, who would, instead of being released on their own or to a sponsor, were instead going to be put in ICE detention. And then again, the government was going to remove them from ICE detention to their homes. So it really was, again, a coercive situation where we know, we have many of the kids who were potentially going to be offered this, who we had talked to, who did not want to seek to go back home. They were scared. We had stories of kids who even said, I'm going to harm myself. If I'm sent back to my home country, like I can't live there and I'll harm myself. Like these are some really tragic situations that we're hearing. And I'm not sure the government that we have right now is thinking about those consequences of even just putting that out there, that these are kids in vulnerable situations who don't have a parent or guardian here in the country necessarily can help walk them through the situation. And you're incentivizing them in terrible, terrible ways.
Right, exactly. Again, the level of vulnerability that they're facing, it's something that we don't fully understand or grasp unless we're in their shoes and feel their fears. But organizations like ImmDef that are on the front lines fighting for these children should just be supported. And before we get into how folks can support your good works, let's just loop back to the Vasquez case for a moment. My understanding through my own research is that you had an opportunity recently to argue whether a preliminary injunction should be issued in this racial profiling matter. Can you just tell us a little bit about if that did happen on September 24th and what's next, and also what's on the horizon for your organization in terms of issues out there that you're watching, right? Due process issues that you guys are talking about when you sit down each day and you're looking at what's going on out there. What are some of the things that concern you or your organization that you think should be litigated, or perhaps you join in litigation that other organizations or coalitions out there are involved in?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the September 24th hearing didn't go forward, and that's in large
Mm.
part based on the Supreme Court's decision, or really non-decision. They didn't have very
Mhm.
much a reasoning in their decision. That does give us an opportunity to collect more information through the raids, both those that already happened and the ones that continue to happen,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that we can really muster enough evidence when we're back in court to make the case that this really is racial profiling. This really is something that's untethered to any probable cause or reasonable suspicion that people are in the country unlawfully, and that's really affecting not just folks who are undocumented, but everyone in LA. There's a real sense in Los Angeles that you have to think twice about going out on the streets if you're black or brown and don't speak English.
Mhm.
But we're back in court this week to argue another part of the case, which is about the access to counsel issues in some of the detention facilities, processing centers in Los Angeles. So we will be back in court this Thursday, the 23rd, arguing for a preliminary injunction on that aspect of the case, ensuring that once people are detained, if they are arrested and detained, that they actually at least have access to counsel so that we can get more information. That'll actually help us gather even more evidence to really make a stronger case against the Fourth Amendment issues, the racial profiling, and lack of reasonable suspicion.
Okay, that's terrific. I wish you well in the fight. Continue to fight the good fight. And let's talk about how folks can get involved. Practically speaking, I know that there are resources on ImmDef's website, and I highly encourage folks to go to their website so you could go check out their resources and some of the other good works that they're involved in. Certainly, if you're in the Los Angeles and San Diego area, you could reach out to them, I guess, for local representation.
We do what we can. Luckily, we have lots of connections to other organizations in Los Angeles and the Southern California area, and we can try to connect them with resources locally.
Terrific. Now, is there anything practically speaking that folks can do to support the good work and the good mission of ImmDef? And if so, tell us how to do it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they should definitely follow us on all our social media. Just look up Immigrant Defenders Law Center or IMDef, and you can find us on X. You can find us on Instagram, on YouTube. We're all over the map when it comes to social media. And follow us there because that really is where we put a lot of information for the community to make sure that they understand their rights, that they know what's happening out in the world, what's being considered, by Congress, what's being considered locally. It's really our tool to get the information out. Because again, the most important thing one person can do is be informed, right? What they can do, what their rights are. You can also, of course, donate to IMDEF and a lot of the other organizations that are doing this great work, not just in Southern California, throughout the country. Like you mentioned, Chicago is in great need right now. New York is in great need right now.
Yeah.
Portland, wherever the administration is targeting immigrant communities, we need to step up and stand up and donate to the organizations doing the hard work there every day. Because you're right, we're at capacity often. We need to be able to bring in people to do more work. That's going to be the best way of doing it is to donate if possible.
And what about a newsletter? Do you have a newsletter that folks can subscribe to as well?
We do. So if you go to imdef.org and there's going to be a button to subscribe to our newsletter, you can sign up there and get more information through email as well.
Perfect, perfect. Well, guys, this was a lot to take in. I know that it was, but thank you so much, Alvaro, for being here. I gave it my best shot. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing what your organization, MDEF, is involved in. And we'll be sure to continue to track your work. And if there's anything else that you'd like to share with our audience, feel free to share it now.
I just wanted to thank you, LaToya, for having me on and your audience for listening, because I think it is really important, like I said, to be informed and to stay active. And so just having people listen and keep this story alive is really important. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Guys, thanks again for watching this video. Be sure to comment below. Let us know your thoughts on the issues that we discussed here. Share this with other people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.